Parents who have concerns about their child's motor milestones are getting bad advice. In fact, if you've gotten advice about motor milestones or are concerned about just overall your child's development, this video is for you because I really want to walk through the basics of developmental milestones and why the motor system plays such a huge role in overall development. I'm Dr. Devin, and I'm a pediatric chiropractor at Reissing Health. And one of the things we focus on so carefully is the development of the motor system because the overall nervous system is connected with it. So when we see babies that are struggling maybe with latching, nursing, swallowing, some of those easy motor functions that happen right at birth, those struggles often lead to struggles with cross crawling, struggles with head control, struggles later on when we start to walk and move and be coordinated and organized with our movements and then run and just overall develop. Those are all tied to other things in these developmental milestones. And so when we look at the big picture, we have to narrow down to these little sequences or windows of motor development and how that helps fuel overall development. So the purpose of this video, if you've heard the phrase, they'll just grow out of it or they'll just get around it, neurologically, that often doesn't happen. And the reason that often doesn't happen is because our nervous systems are built in sequence. When we activate really early on, latching and basic head control, basic cross, crawl, rolling, doing all of those different things, those are building blocks for what comes next. If a baby isn't really good at latching or head control, then that is going to put their sequence off for when it comes to moving and crawling and standing and walking. And oftentimes this is where you'll find them skip milestones altogether, or the coordination of milestones leads to them struggling in the next milestone or later on. And oftentimes with motor milestones, to skip ahead, when kids struggle with that, it can often lead to behavioral challenges, emotional challenges, focus, attention later on when they're 4, 5, 6, or 7, that you then can all trace back to the motor system. So I want to go in detail with this for you because if you've heard that they're just going to grow out of it, that's often not the case. And we really want you to be able to get ahead of that. So I'm going to change screens for you real quick. This is actually a graph that we often use when masterminding with other pediatric chiropractors. So there's a lot going on here, but what I want you to focus on is the developmental timeline from birth right here. And what we should see is initially at birth, babies should be nursing well, having easy movements. They should be, very relaxed, have a little bit of head control, and they should develop from that with rolling, activating tummy time, being able to come up on all fours, starting that cross crawling. And then, we get into this around a little bit before a year, right in this next phase. This sequence is more important at the time where they're more stable, they're more able to cruise, they're able to walk, and they're able to coordinate. But what happens during these 3 big motor leaps? Of these 3 big motor milestones, well, a lot happens, right? Our kiddos, not only do they start to, eat solid foods, be exposed to the environment with the immune system, they develop their sensory system as well. They start to experience behavioral changes and social interactions, and all of these other things are developing right along with that motor system. But the motor system never stops. And so if they miss a motor milestone or skip a motor milestone, that can actually hamper other forms of development. And I'll give you 2 big examples. One is with digestion. Kids start solid foods right at 6 months. And if they're not good with movement, with gross motor and being able to sit up well and be able to kind of start cross crawling at that point, their smooth muscle system, the digestive system, isn't going to move food along as well. And this is why we see a lot of kids that will struggle with digestive challenges when they start eating solid foods because they're behind in motor milestones. And the second big thing we see is when kids get a little bit older and they're having trouble with coordination or movement. For example, they may be the kiddo that walks on their toes. They might be the kiddo, that can't run in a straight line easy. it might be hard for them to balance or coordinate, catch a ball, or, be able to do some of those fine motor skills in corporation while they're doing those gross motor things. Those same things develop and integrate at the same time as our sensory system. And that's how we experience the environment from a sensory seeking with loud noises and touch and taste and feel and experience our environment overall. That development happens at the same time as the motor development. And so when we see kids that just have trouble with sensory, the sensory environment around them, whether they may be adverse to sensory reactions or they're more seeking to it, often it gets tied to motor balance. Now, coming off this graph, if you've never seen this, you're probably thinking, okay, yes, if I look back, there may have been a motor challenge. And now looking forward, my child does struggle with XYZ, right? Whether it be sensory, behavioral, emotional, all of that. How do we look and how do we help with that? Well, the key is to measure their nervous system, to look at where it's at now, where it will be at 4, 5, 6, or whether it be still early in infancy, to see where these jam ups or these miscommunications occur. Now, we can do that with what we call our insight scan. And this looks at neurology from really 3 different angles. It looks at the neuromotor system to see where they're moving well, where they're holding either too much or too little tension from that motor development. Then secondly, looking at their autonomic system. That shows a balance in the sensory system, in the immune system, in the digestive system, and then looking overall at how much just really either energy they have in their system. So kids that are really energetic and bouncing off the walls, or maybe even some exhaustion, what we do is we use a scan called heart rate variability. And that test, all 3 of those tests, they help us to look at information and say, okay, where is the motor system? But then where are the other developmental systems that come with that? Are they either ahead or behind, so that we can get to the bottom of it and we can help them to not only catch up, but to catch up in the right sequence? Because sequence is so important. The motor system builds upon itself, and every other system of the body builds upon itself too. So the reason I wanted to do this video is, I don't want you to feel helpless. If you heard, okay, they're going to grow out of it, maybe they're still struggling. There are things you can do. We can get that measured. We can look and we can see exactly where it is, and we can develop a care plan to get working to help them get that communication back, to reopen that window, to allow them to master those softer skills, to then build upon them for overall really calm and clear development. So I want you to watch this knowing that there is action you can take if there's a delay in a milestone. And it's not as easy as them just growing out and skipping it, but it can really help them down the road in their development if you help them fix that and go back through that sequence. So I hope this finds you well. If you have more questions, please DM us. We have a link to this and some more information in our bio where you can dig in and look very carefully. How do I get scanned? How do I look at the measurements of how we can help our kids to just respond and just get out when they're struggling with milestones? So I hope this finds you well. Take care and God bless.